Okay, so we have quorum, so we can call the meeting to order. Just waiting. So I'll start by saying the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. With that, I will look to committee for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. And I see none. So I want to advise people that I'm going to do a little bit of a change in order of the agenda. We have a councillor commission submission coming up later, and so I want to make sure that that we don't get there before the councillor is able to arrive at the meeting. So we'll start with item 6.1, which is under the confidential items. It's a personal matter pertaining to identifiable individuals, including municipal employees, with respect to the 2020 Mayor's New Year's Honor List. So I'll look for a motion to go in camera for that. Moved by Councillor Hillier and seconded by Councillor Pelosa.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
So we'll head into committee room 3. It will be very brief. We'll be back, I suspect, in about 5 minutes. All right, we're back. So we'll start with the consent items. I have asked staff to give us a brief introduction on items 2.4, 2.5, sorry, not 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7. So just for ease, I'll pull those three. Any other consent items to be pulled? The rest are advisory committee reports. Do I have a mover for those? A move by Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Hillier. So we're voting on item 2.1 through to 2.4.
I'll vote manually yay. It's not giving me an option to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so moving along to item 2.5, which is the income-related subsidized public transit program. And we have Ms. Cheryl Smith to just give us a brief introduction on this report.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the income-related subsidized transit program was implemented in January 2018. And the purpose of the program was to provide accessible public transit to individuals in order to help remove barriers that affect a person's quality of life. It's one of 5 subsidized transit programs that we support. And the program offers eligible residents a $52 monthly bus pass. So that's a 36% subsidy. So in the spring of 2019, we undertook an evaluation and we looked at the result. We looked at all the participants from 2018. We did participant surveys, we did focus groups, and we also looked at key data from both the LTC and that the city had collected. So overall, participants reported that the program had benefited them greatly. They had more money to buy things that they needed. It allowed them to ride the bus more often, and the pass was more affordable for them. It also revealed a number of challenges, including some weren't even aware of the program. They had inconsistent experiences across purchase locations, and there was some confusion at time where to go. Some services were provided by the city, and some services were provided by the LTC at their 2 offices. So based on this, we're going to undertake a number of actions right now and for 2019 to improve our communication strategy, to improve our application process and training of our staff and LTC staff who support the program. In addition, in collaboration with the LTC, Civic Administration has prepared a business case that you will see through the multi-year budget process, and it will recommend an integrated business model to support all 5 affordable transit programs. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Committee, questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the update through you to staff. I'm just wondering, when we talk about the surveys that were distributed, were these solely distributed as paper surveys? Because I noticed that the age definitely skews toward the older demographics that completed them. Obviously, I think we've got ridership from across age ranges. So was there an online companion survey that a URL could direct people to so that they could complete them online, which tends to be a preference of younger transit users?
Through the chair, we looked at as we surveyed 2018 program participants, so we were able to send a survey to all participants in the database. So we knew already if participants had gone online to apply for a bus pass or those who didn't go online, and we sent them a survey through Canada Post. So we did most. The majority were through online, and those that we didn't have an email address to, we sent it through Canada Post.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff, just looking for any insight you might have in, at the bottom of the report, it says the administration burden with the management of 5 separate funding agreements between the City of London and the LTC. Looking to see if you have any concept of what the associated cost is of administrative burden and ways that we could refine the system to have more efficiencies and savings of how cumbersome is the process.
Thank you, through the chair. So as part of the multi-year business budget case, that was a lot of piece. We are looking at a process. We worked with LTC, and we're going to propose a process to reduce that burden, so that basically right now we have, for example, 5 different contracts, 5 different agreements for each program, different points of contact to determine eligibility. So as part of that, we're looking, if we integrate all 5 programs, we will maintain the 5, but we will integrate it into one administrative process for all 5.
I have a question. So of the 5 different programs, I believe that not all of them are sort of the pricing, or the cost of to the city from LTC. It's not costed the same way. So I think most of them are per pass and not necessarily per ride. Do you know what I'm talking about? And if so, can you elaborate on that a little bit and sort of explain how they are different?
So through the chair, the LTC bills us monthly based on actual rides. So for example, subsidized transit for the visually impaired is per ride at 100% subsidy. Children 12 and under for free is per ride at 100% subsidy. Subsidized transit for youth, we're billed on passes, that's $52 monthly. And as part of that agreement, we kind of have what's termed bulk buying. So depending on the number of passes we purchase, we get a slight discount once we reach a certain threshold. That's the only discount per passes we get is subsidized youth. Subsidized transit for seniors, we're billed per ticket, and we get it's a 25% subsidy per ticket. And then income-related transit for individuals 18 and over, that's a 36% subsidy, and we're billed per pass.
So for part of your goal going forward to reduce the administrative burden, will that also involve looking at, so basically making it the same for each one, hopefully on a per ride basis?
Through the chair, that is correct. We will look at streamlining the whole process.
Great, thanks for that. Any other questions or comments, concerns? Thank you very much for the report. Thanks for the introduction and welcome. I know you've been to this committee before, but now you have the title to go along with it, and I'm happy to have you here. With that, I'm looking for a mover. So the staff recommendation is moved by Councillor Pelosa and seconded by Councillor Sully. We can vote now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, on to item 2.6, which is Choose London, Innovative, Vibrant, and Global, London's Newcomer Strategy Year 1 Update. And we have Ms. Sandra Daters-Beer here to give us a brief introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for the use of my full name. I ask the Council's indulgence. I've just come from a dental appointment, so if it sounds like I got trouble speaking, that's why. It's really my pleasure to be able to bring forth this report from our staff who've developed the work for it and have facilitated the work of the community stakeholders. And I want to acknowledge the co-chairs of our newcomer strategy, Dr. Desanani and Joachim Baez. They are up in the gallery. They're waving at you. And they have been involved in this work from the beginning. And you'll remember that council asked us to develop a strategy as part of the 2015 to 2019 strategic plan. We brought this back to council in June of 2018. And this is the work of, in this report, the work that they've been doing. And it's been significant amount of work and very well received in this community. One of the things I want to highlight is both to thank them and the advisory work that they've been doing, but also to acknowledge that we have a really unique initiative this coming Thursday. For those of you who've had the chance to read the report and those of you who are listening, we have the Newcomer Day, the first ever Newcomer Day here at City Hall on Thursday, an opportunity for us to demonstrate to our newcomers in our community what London is all about. And so we're really looking for people to come forward. But I do really want to again thank our stakeholders in the community for the work that they've done. And this is a highlight report of the work that's been done by both of them. And happy to take any questions or happy to have our stakeholders take questions as well.
Thank you. Comments, questions from committee? Okay, I just want to say thank you for the report. Thanks for the information, and thanks to the community, the stakeholders, everybody that worked on this. I know it's been a lot of work. I'm glad to hear that it's been well received. I know we have a number of challenges in the area of the jobs and employment in London, and I think this is a really great fit in that whole portfolio. We need to attract newcomers to London, and we need to make them feel welcome and make sure that the opportunities are there for all Londoners, no matter where they come from or what they look like. And I'm really happy to see this this moving forward. So thanks very much. Thanks for coming to committee. Thanks for the presentation. Looking for a mover. Moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. We can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, and now item 2.7 is the core area informed response and resting spaces update. And we are back to you, Ms. Datersbeer.
Through the chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly about this report. It relates to the work of the Coordinated Informed Response Initiative that Council supported a number of months ago. As you recall, a pilot project was implemented from April to December of 2018, during which we provided supports across our community to those who are experiencing difficulty because of unpredictable behavior, disruptive behavior, where we see urban camping or sleeping rough. And so this initiative came back online again in April of 2019 and has been operating over the last number of months. It is a partnership, a significant partnership, and I don't want to underestimate the partnership both between city and civic administration and the work of many civic departments, and also our partners at London Cares and other service agencies in our community. The intention is to support those people who are vulnerable in our community, those who are living rough, and those who are looking for opportunities to find housing. The goal is to find housing for people, and that's the efforts through the Coordinated Informed Response work. This is, as you know, Council approved funding for this initiative on a fiscal basis until the end of 2019. We'll be coming back in 2020 with a submission for the multi-year budget. But this report gives you an overview of the types of services that have been provided through this initiative and the numbers of people who've been helped and assisted. And I'm happy to take questions or have our staff respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Committee, questions, comments? I have a question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I just want to say to Ms. Datersbeer and everybody involved in this, I think it's a sincere thanks from all of us, and not just on council, but from Londoners. This is a really complex issue. It's impacting our community in many different ways. There's not one easy solution, but this is making a difference. I know it's not easy work, but it is very much appreciated.
So I went to I don't know, a conference or some kind of day that was held at the Western Fair. I think you were there, Ms. Datersbeer. There was an expert on this issue, on the whole sleeping rough, urban encampments, that sort of thing, and the different research that this person had done across the country, I believe, and the different demographics, just very similar to this report that you've provided here. And this report is very consistent with some of the things that I learned on that day and the challenges that are faced. It was a day that was geared towards community outreach, workers who connect and interact with the people living in this way on a daily basis. So my question is, seeing how all of these issues, the core area informed response and a response to housing issues and homelessness prevention, they all interact. Do you have data across all the different areas that show, so for example, people that have been contacted through this program and have been referred to housing services or emergency shelters or support services, do we have data that's like sort of throughout the system where we see we made this referral in this way, and then they took it up and they went to the service, they connected with the service provider, and then they found shelter or they found permanent housing? Do we have a way of following, say, an individual and respecting their privacy, but following them through the system?
Through the chair, that's a very good question. I was just turning to Craig Cooper, our manager of homeless prevention, to get a little sense about that. I think it's probably fair to say that we have some of that information, Madam Chair. There's work to be done in terms of how we collect data in this area and how we support that data with the interface between homeless prevention, the CIR program, our housing services area. So as an example only, it's possible that we may have people who appear on our housing wait list who might be concurrently involved in the CIR program. Perhaps they have applied for housing, can't find housing, have become homeless, might appear to be in some ways having inconsistent housing and might be sleeping rough. So I do think that there's a value in us looking and continuing to look at the way that we collect that data, and we show the trajectory of people, recognizing, of course, we want to do that in a way that's respectful and a way that supports them doing that work as well. So I think over the next number of months, and we're happy to have our coordinator, Debbie, is up there, and we were able to hire a coordinator with council support for this initiative. And I think we're going to start to look at how we collect data. There's a ton of data for this program, but we're trying to kind of look at how we share that data, both with you as council members, but also with the community, to show the outcomes that we're hoping to get. At this point, there has been some concern about us collecting garbage and collecting needles and moving people along. And most of that relates to the fact that our challenges are around finding housing units. And so part of that challenge has to do with ensuring that we work with our community and landlords about making units available. As you know, and you've heard from me many times, the rents in these community for 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms are significantly higher than they were 6 months ago, and significantly higher than they were 12 months ago. So our challenge is about supporting these people relates to housing as well. So we're looking at those things, but an ability to show a trajectory for people would be very helpful, and we'll work on that.
So, and a second question, which you probably will be more difficult to answer. So this is a pilot project, and being aware of all of the great work that your staff and people in the community are doing in this area. Do you feel it's working? Do you think, is there a positive trend, or are we stuck in one spot, or is it even getting worse? Do you have a sense on if it's working?
Through the chair, my answer is yes. And it's not a qualified yes, but it is a yes from the standpoint of any additional supports you provide for people that they didn't already have is a benefit to them. And whether that means providing supports to individuals who are marginalized or feeling that they can't find other places to go, or whether it's providing broader supports to the community around sharing of information, sharing of the reasons for harm reduction, providing cleanup in some areas, or actually supporting neighborhood associations to understand why some of these challenges exist. That's kind of the gamut of this program. The unique piece about this program is, as I mentioned earlier, the ability of service providers and city staff to work in partnership. And we've worked through a lot of growing pains in terms of who does what when and how we best support those individuals. Ultimately, our goal is a housing first goal. People should be housed, and from there we support them. Some of these people are we're working towards housing with them. Some are ready to be housed, some will work towards that. But ultimately, any person that we house through this initiative, it's a benefit.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? No? Okay. I'm looking for a mover of the staff recommendation, Councillor Lewis, and seconded by Councillor Pelosa. We can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
All right, moving right along to the scheduled items, and we have item 3.1, and we've passed 4:15, so we can hear this item. It's a public participation meeting, and we're looking for input regarding the proposed name for the currently temporarily named Community Center on Wayville. And I'll look for someone to open the PPM. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hillier.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Stafford, do you want to say a few things before we go to the community and get their input?
Through the chair, I don't know if I need to say too much. We've discussed this before. It's an exciting new center that's opening up at the corner of several corners actually, but East Lyons Park, but corner of Churchill and Wayville. And we've sent the information out to the community through various methods, and we're excited to hear what the community would like to call the new center.
Thanks very much. So I will go to anybody here who's looking to speak to this item. You can come up to the microphone. You have up to 5 minutes to speak, but please don't feel the need to fill those whole 5 minutes if you don't want to. I'll need your name, and if you're comfortable, your address.
My name is, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Bill McLaughlin. I'm the secretary of the London East Lyons Club, and I would like to speak to you today in favor of keeping the East Lyons name associated with the new community center to be located at 1731 Churchill Ave, or better known currently as East Lyons Park. Admittedly, as a member of the London East Lyons Club, I am somewhat biased. However, I am proud to say I have been a member of this club for 27 years. I remember as a new Lion, we would hold executive meetings at the East Lyons Artisan Center building that was previously located at East Lyons Park. Last year, our club participated once again in the Adopt a Park Cleanup Day, working around the construction site. Lions Clubs International is the largest service club organization in the world, with service clubs in 182 countries with over 1.45 million members in total worldwide. The London East Lyons Club chartered in May of 1951. The group consisted of local residents and business leaders in the community coming together to form a service club. Their first major project was to build a park. The members at the time bought the land using their own homes and businesses as collateral for the mortgage and built it with their own sweat and hard work. In 1951, members held work parties to clear the land for a playground and a baseball diamond with backstop. In 1953, they added a swimming pool, which they also built. Throughout this period, they also continued to maintain the park. From 1962 to 64, the club contributed towards additional park equipment and the building of a pool house and auditorium. Without that vision, execution, and ongoing commitment, there may not be a park there today and a convenient area of land which the city already owns, gifted to them by the London East Lyons, on which to build this exciting new community center. I had the opportunity to attend a town hall meeting last week for the residents in Ward 2. The things I took away from that meeting when the community center discussion came up confirmed what I already suspected and yet surprised me in a sense. East Lions Park is already a well-known established location in the community that people relate to. In practical terms, I get the sense many residents in the area either already do and will continue to refer to the new building as East Lions Community Center or East Lions Park. It was also heartwarming to see at the town hall that residents of the community felt a connection to the park and favored the East Lions name. An individual stood up, not a Lions member, and gave a brief statement relating some of the general history of the park I mentioned earlier and recognized the Lions' involvement while speaking in favor of the East Lions name. This brought a round of applause from the audience. It made me very proud, and I could not help but think of how proud the club's founding members would be to know that their park continues to have an impact on the community even today, and how it will evolve with this exciting new transformation to have an even greater impact in the near future. An October 3rd CTV News article quotes the Ward 2 councillor who conducted online polling as saying, "The top name, far and away, is East Lions Community Center." From the day we learned that East Lions Park would undergo major changes, both to the park and include the building of a new community center, we have greeted this news with enthusiasm and eagerness to sit down with City Hall and discuss our continued development and involvement in this project. We are currently discussing sponsorship opportunities with programming as well as physical upgrades to the park with City of London administrators. We look forward to finalizing those agreements in the near future. It is my personal hope and the hope of the London East Lions Club, which I represent here today, and I think the opinion of many members of the community, that the East Lions name remain prominent in the name of this exciting new community center located at our park. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. If you would like to submit your submission, we will include that in the report from committee, and one of the clerks will come up and get it from you, if that's okay. Is there anybody else here to speak to this matter? I see the Lions are all supporting the Lions, and I'm wondering if a new lion would be called a cub. Yes? So I'm not seeing any more members of the public wishing to speak to this, so I will look for a motion to close by closing the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Sully, seconded by Councillor Hillier.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Anybody from the committee wish to comment, speak? Councillor Lewis, and you can speak really slowly if you like.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this will be slow enough to give Councillor Hopkins time to arrive, but I'm happy to talk about this at great length, so if you'll indulge me in a time extension, I'm sure I can eat up enough time to give her an opportunity to be here. And first, I've said it before, I'll say it again, my sincere thanks to Mr. Stafford, Ms. Livingston, all of those who have been involved in this very, very long process. Most of you probably weren't even here 20 years ago when the lobbying started from the old Argyle Community Association to get this built. I was very excited last night actually to look out my front window and see that there were actually lights on inside at 9 o'clock at night. So there's inside activity happening. It's not just the outside work happening. And I'm very hopeful that when I schedule the next Ward 2 meeting, it can be in one of the meeting rooms at the new community center. Mr. McLaughlin referenced some of the community engagement that I've done on this project, seeking the community's input. I indicated when we received the staff recommendation that the community center on Wavell sort of landed flat with constituents and they weren't really inspired by it. So I did what I think we all do when we have questions for our constituents. I went out and chatted with them, and I had online engagement. I had a ward meeting. I've talked to people in the grocery store about it. In fact, Sunday afternoon, I stopped at Metro to pick up some veggies to go with the dinner I was going to barbecue, and had a conversation in the parking lot about it. People are very excited to see this center open. I will tell you that I had 479 online engagements over the naming of this. And by far and away, as Mr. McLaughlin indicated, East Lyons in the name was a top request from people. And I'd say that was in the 70 to 75% range. People did say, you know what, we're not changing the name of the park. We only have the park because of the Lions, and I'm gonna call it East Lyons Community Center, whatever you name it. There were some other suggestions, and certainly the Argyle community has been very vocal about wanting to push the Argyle identity, that we're not just generic East London, that there's an Argyle neighborhood there. So Argyle was a solid second place that people said, we want to see Argyle in the name somewhere. Some folks, particularly those with some real history of the area, had suggested Pottersburg be in the name somewhere. I also heard, because of the work that's been done recently by this committee with Vimy Ridge Park, but also with all the work that's happened at Veterans Memorial Parkway, that maybe Veterans Memorial Community Center might be an appropriate name. But overwhelmingly, East Lyons was something people wanted to see in the name. They wanted to see the tradition, the reason that the park is there in the first place, be reflected in the naming of this community center. I've talked to the Lions Club members who attended the ward meeting last week. I said, you know, the one thing that we have to keep in mind here, and I think I'll say thank you to Councillor Squire for letting me borrow his tickets for the Knights game last week, where I picked up this shirt, but we've seen the name of that arena change, and they're well aware that there's a potential in the future that a sponsor may step forward, and we may look to change the name if that happens. But I think a good starting point for this is to have East Lyons in the name. I had even done a little online poll on the weekend, because I was giving this a lot of thought as I was at the game, thinking, this building's name has been changed already. And I thought maybe we could come up with a blended name, East Lyons Argyle Place or East London's Argyle Center. And 185 people voted in that little online poll, and 70% were in favor of it. And a lot of the comments that I heard were, yes, because you got East Lyons in the name, or yes, because you got Argyle in the name, or both. So there's certainly a community identity that's there already that Community Center on Wayville doesn't capture. But that East Lyons Community Center or East Lyons Argyle Center would capture, I think, very strongly. We're very excited to see this center open. I do know that one of the things that came back to us in the original staff recommendation was the concern about whether or not the addressing might be an issue with Argyle in the name, and whether that might cause some confusion with Argyle Arena, particularly in the event that emergency services was called and had to respond to a call. And of course, in an emergency, going to the wrong building can be the difference between life and death. So I have a couple of more comments to share, but before I do that, Madam Chair, I want to ask through you to staff if the concern about the Argyle Community Center name, if that's something they feel would still be there if we had East Lyons Argyle Center or East Lyons Argyle Place, because I know that there's still, and I've seen it in other communities, you have a community center and an arena with the same beginning of the name, and people invariably go to the wrong building. As a hockey coach, I may have gone to the wrong building once myself. So staff, do you see that still being a problem if there's a blended name there?
Through the chair, we'd have to follow up with the emergency services question, but from a customer standpoint, we do have some confusion around Carling Arena and the Carling Heights Optimist Center, even though they're really called quite different. People head to Carling, and it is something that happens fairly regularly, actually, and I would say it's a once-a-week issue of sort of rushing there to drop your child off, or rushing there to a program yourself. Certainly once you do it once, you don't do it again. So I mean, it goes away, but there is potential for some confusion there. I think the blended name helps solve some of that for sure.
Okay, so with that in mind, I'm still concerned that there could be confusion, and particularly arenas have out-of-town visitors regularly. The community center may not so much, but I'm concerned that somebody at the arena might call for EMS and say the Argyle Community Center and have them directed to the wrong building. As much as I would like to see Argyle in the name, I think that considering what I've just heard and with all the community feedback I've had, we do have Argyle Arena. I'm also talking to the library about potentially rebranding the library as the Argyle Library. The BIA is doing some great work with the branding that they've done with the crosswalks and the pole wraps to signify the entrance to the Argyle BIA. So I think we're pushing that Argyle identity pretty strongly. And so I think in this case, I'm going to put forward a motion, and hopefully I'll have a seconder, that the recommended name for the new community center be the East Lyons Community Center.
Okay, so I'm seeing Councillor Hillier will, oh, I've got a competition to second that. Councillor Sully actually wishes to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was on the speakers list because I wanted to make sure to second this motion, being the other councillor from the East End, and I wanted to support this. And I know, and thank you, Hillier, for your enthusiasm as well. And I'll commend Councillor Lewis because I know he's been working on this for years, even in the background, and having conversations even before he was around this horseshoe, and just watching his engagement on this, whether it was on social media or whether he's talking to constituents, because some of them were messaging me, because obviously they know I'm also on council and also on this committee, so they were sending me messages and had opportunities to speak to them as well. And I also want to thank the members of the public for coming today and speaking today. So I think this is really great, and I think this is really a great example of when everyone comes together and you have the community, you have the staff, you have the councilor working together to figure out what works best. And I think that's why I'm happy to support this motion and second it. So kudos to the public, kudos to staff, and kudos to Councillor Lewis.
Lots of kudos. Okay, Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As also, I was waiting on the speakers list. A question through you to staff in regards to our naming policies with the City of London. And hearing that from the gallery that they're already looking at what they've done, they've already done so much. What would it take for the building to officially meet criteria, or just be named this, that it wouldn't be the concern of us recognizing the work and the gift that's already been given and a corporation renaming it? Just thinking about if we move forward with this, of the community feeling that they're recognizing good work that's already been done and then we just sell out. How could we make it that it couldn't be undone?
Through the chair, that's a tough question. There is a sponsorship and naming policy, and we've recently, over the past few years, developed a sponsorship policy for buildings and amenities and recreation amenities throughout the city. We currently have people that go out and do that and sell those items that we have. We've had them valued as to what the items are. We haven't had opportunity at this point in time. I think there's open conversation to have a hybrid name. If it's I probably shouldn't use, we'll say the City of London East Lyons Center or something like that. I think there's a possibility for a hybrid name that we can look at, and I think you work with the potential sponsor to reach that. It's a difficult one. We are actively pursuing, all sites, whether it's the White Oaks Community Center or the newly named, if it ends up becoming the East Lyons Community Center. And as Councillor Lewis pointed out, he was open in his discussions that way. So it's a challenge. It's something that we can look at, bring to council, but it's something that is in the policy that we are actively pursuing as a revenue opportunity.
Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did want to just go on record and let folks know that we have had some sponsors step forward to sponsor particular items or programs around the center, and we're continuing to develop partnerships around that as well. So there are naming opportunities and sponsorship opportunities that aren't tied to the name of the building as well. So we can certainly look at those options if a partner came forward and said, we would really like to contribute to this in some way. I did want to say that Mr. Stafford, I did hear a couple of times in my suggestion, or in my consultation, people were jokingly saying, well, we should call it the Lewis Stafford Center. And I did inform them that we would have to be dead for that to be a viable consideration in the naming policy. So since neither one of us are planning to do that anytime soon, I told them I wouldn't put that name forward today. But I think it's exciting that we have sponsors who have stepped forward to help in other ways. And I know that we had that conversation with the Lions, who were able to attend last week's meeting as well, that they're keen to support some programming there too. So it's what's in a name, there's lots in a name, but there's lots not in the name that people can support us with in this center too.
So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Any other questions, comments, concerns? No, then we can vote on this motion.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Good work, everybody. So we are on to actually items for direction, and 4.1 is the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. We'll be receiving that advisory committee report, but there is one item they have asked for direction to the London Police Services Board and Corporate Security, that they have requested a report back at a future meeting about all incidents of, a future meeting of the advisory committee, about all incidents of violence or potential violence that were reported within parks and facilities that are owned by the City of London, and the outcome of these incidents that occurred in 2019. So the advisory committee is looking for this information. And it would be a request from council to the London Police Services Board for this information to be provided to the advisory committee. The advisory committee only advises council through this standing committee. They do not advise or report in any way to the London Police Services or the London Police Service Board. So I just wanted to bring that to committee's attention, knowing that that request for direction is in there. Did you have a comment, Councillor Sally?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. Do you know if they had some initial conversations yet? And do you know if they weren't just able to have that conversation, just get that information without having to make a request through us? Because I mean, my question is are they hoping that London Police compiles all the data for them? Because I mean, we have the website where we do have that information, so they want us to have someone sit there and pull the data for them and give us report back to the committee.
They are asking for the board and or corporate security to compile the information and give it to them. That's my understanding, although I was not at the meeting and nobody.
He was.
Oh, do you recall?
Through the chair, there was some general discussion prior to related to funding for neighborhood watch services. And this kind of informed the motion from one of the members who was interested in knowing how the city handles these types of incidents that neighborhood watch might normally in a private area, how the city handles it in city facilities and city parks.
So just for clarity, because I'm seeing some of my colleagues also kind of confused too. So you're saying how the city handles the incidents of like violence and crime, or the London Police? For clarity.
Through the chair, it was both. There wasn't too much clarity in terms of how to delineate those two. I think that from the advisory committee members' perspective, contacting both the police board or requesting of the police board and of corporate security this information, they would just have the fullest picture possible with regards to any incidents of violence or potential violence on corporate land, essentially.
Okay, through the chair, sorry for the back and forth. Maybe I'll ask specifically, is there someone from our staff here that could speak about corporate service? I know I'm not seeing Dave here, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone else from staff. No, not seeing, so. Or maybe Parks, maybe.
Through the chair, as far as Parks, violent crime, it gets reported. We encourage citizens certainly to report things through the police board. So I think what's being asked for here, or through the police, so it's being asked for, they would have information. Our corporate security does as well. So if they get and keep in touch if there's a pattern of thefts or a pattern of other crimes that may be happening in parks, and we quite often will have staff from our Parks Department go out with and meet with a member of the core unit or another member of the police with sometimes yourselves or citizens to figure out what's going wrong. I know there's, in Cheryl's area, there's some safety audits that happen within parks, but police and security would have the information to be able to come up with what types of crimes are happening. It's what they can share and what information they can share would be up to them, but there would be some information that they would have. Whether they're ready to report back or how readily available that is, we'd have to ask them. Thanks.
And sorry that I'm hogging the mic, Madam Chair, just because obviously there's always going to be implications of trying to get this data from London Police, and means someone's going to have to sit down and pull all the information that's being asked. So I guess my question was, do you know if there was, maybe the clerk knows, was there a London Police representative at the meeting, and did they participate in the discussion? That perhaps maybe did they help push in this direction? I'm just trying to understand kind of, or it was just specifically just the committee asking this and wanting a report back through the city from the London Police Service Board, because we do reports with annual stats, and those things do happen naturally. But a specific report just for the parks and recreations, I don't know what that would mean.
It actually, the motion is within parks and facilities that are owned by the City of London.
Through the chair, no, there was no police representative present at the meeting. I think this was just kind of a let's get the ball rolling on various projects or various, projects at that committee. That was their first meeting. So I think this was just an initiative to kind of get going on various tasks.
And I just want to say welcome to Dan Turner retroactively. Welcome to our committee. Wonderful to have you. Anything else, Councillor Sully?
So I think we'll probably have to change the word "be requested." We'll probably have to, not to say water it down, but have to think of another word, but I'll look to committee if there's any further discussion on this, and I'll just be quiet for now.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to fellow Councillor Sally for raising some concerns that I also had with this in regards to incidences of violence. Do they mean physical violence, verbal violence, potential violence? How do you even measure potential violence? And when we're talking even the scope of, if it came up in the discussions of Neighborhood Watch, well, Neighborhood Watch isn't in our city facilities. And I'm even thinking about any legal implications of us putting this out and for the public to consume it with no context of what was happening, and some investigations would still be underway, and they aren't that fast of a turnaround time. So as per its wording through the committee, I'm not comfortable with it, and I would ask that we send it back to committee for some clarification of exactly what they're looking for, the context they want to use this information for. Though respecting that they're eager to get going, I just need to know a little bit more before I can make this request of somebody else.
As a member of the Police Services Board, as the chair of the Police Services Board, what do you think about referring it back to the advisory committee, Councillor?
So as you guys know, as a counselor, I'm always encouraging members of the public to ask questions and to hold the board accountable. But what I'm trying to get at is, just as a counselor prior to me alluded, there is some difficulty with, what is potential violence? I don't want to speak for the police service, but I don't think we have potential violence as a category. I think that's very hard. So, I'm 1%, just 51% over of wanting to refer back just for clarity, but I hate doing that because I understand the committee doesn't meet as often and it causes significant delays. But then again, I don't want to kind of dilute what they were trying to get. So I'm kind of stuck. So maybe I'll need another minute or two and maybe someone else will say something, but I'm kind of where Elizabeth is at.
So I will give some context from what I know from having met with this advisory committee in the past, is they are very limited in, so somebody might say, well, go have a dialogue with the London Police Service and find out what kind of information is available, what reporting they do, or they do not have that ability or authority to go directly to London Police Service. They can only come through this standing committee. That's the mechanism, how it works. So I know that there is a heat map, which just shows crime in general, and it doesn't necessarily say what kind of crime, I believe.
So that's where it's complicated. It does, but then there's some crimes, if I'm not mistaken, where sometimes if it's maybe a sexual assault or certain crimes where then they make a decision. So I think there's some operational decisions with it. So I don't want to misspeak, but so it's not as crystal clear as maybe, but the crime map does provide that information.
I wonder if the softening of the language could be something like that City Council consider requesting London Police Service and corporate security to report back. So that way it's not an order coming from council, but that, just a suggestion. We can also note and file. Councillor Lewis.
Actually, Madam Chair, I was just moving my hand because I was giving this some thought. But I will take this opportunity to say I would echo Councillor Peloz's comments. I'm really uncomfortable with what has come before us because I'm not sure really what type of information that they are looking for. Are they just looking for an incident count? Are they looking for more specifics in the types? And I'm really concerned about language that includes potential violence because I think it lends itself to misrepresenting how overall safe our parks and our facilities really are at the end of the day.
Okay, and there's some suggested language here that clause 5.2 be referred back to the advisory committee for further clarification of the information being requested. Councillor Sully.
So I think I'm 52% now on that. The only thing I was going to maybe consider adding, and I want to see if we're able to do this. So if we're referring it, but in that same process, is there a mechanism that we could say, they can contact LPS or contact corporate services directly? Like, can we just, and they can have that conversation with them because corporate security might be able to just attend the meeting. Because I think that's what maybe it could be, what could be resolved, where just corporate security just showing up to the meeting instead of them dealing with this in, I guess, October and then coming back in November and then us deciding and they get back in December, all in time. They could have just had one person from corporate security just attend the meeting. So I'm not sure, if we could refer it back for clarification, but if maybe corporate security might be able to just provide some of the answers for them.
So, Councillor, way back in the day, when I met with this advisory committee, I learned that a member of the London Police Service used to attend their meetings on a regular basis. And over time, different things happened and that stopped happening. So I think so we know that we cannot direct London Police Service to do anything. I'm not sure if we can even direct the board, but we could make a motion to request a representative from corporate security to speak to the advisory committee. We could do, so would we do the referral and, go ahead, Counselor?
So I was going to say, I think it's fair to say that we will, allow them to invite LPS and the corporate security, that's open invitation, and it's up to them if they choose to come or not, right? Is that safe? And allows that mechanism to be maybe help resolve itself instead of it coming back and playing ping pong.
So we have a referral or, so invite and refer, so refer the clause back to, we can't.
For further clarification, you can't also invite.
Right. They're kind of contradictory, a referral is a referral. Go ahead, Counselor.
So through the chair, I don't think it's contradictory because we're asking for the referral because there's a lot of questions that still remain. But what I'm saying is to invite, which is a separate, it's an amendment, right? It has nothing to do with the motion because they didn't ask for that, right? So instead of them coming back, because what I'm starting to gather is that as you mentioned, LPS aren't at the meetings, the corporate security wasn't at the meetings, and they can't just ask people to come to the meeting. So I'm just saying that include an invitation if they choose to want to take it up or not. But if not, then just refer. I don't want to prolong this, but I just want to make sure I'm not, because I know the committees in the past have come to us and said, we've tried to come to council and you guys don't listen to us and don't hear us. So I'm trying to hear them, but they're not here to clarify, and I don't want to delay it for them, but I'm also trying to be mindful of the police service and corporate security's time and resources.
Did we have a mover and a seconder on the refer back? Did Councillor Lewis second the refer? Okay. So Councillor Sali is suggesting as an amendment to the referral. Can you amend a referral? So I'm just looking at the councillors who had talked about referral, if having a B as an invite to London Police Service Board, a representative from LPSB and a representative from Corporate Security attend a future meeting of the advisory committee.
LPS.
You're good with that?
LPS, not board.
LPS, okay. So the motion would read that the following actions be taken with respect to the 6th report of the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Advisory Committee from its meeting held on September 26, 2019. A, Clause 5.2 be referred back to Community Safety and Crime Prevention for further clarification of the information being requested. B, that representatives of the London Police Service and Corporate Security be invited to attend a future meeting of the advisory committee. And oh, okay, it's be invited to attend a future meeting to discuss current statistics that may be available. Does that sound good to committee? And then C, that the remainder of the report be received. Does that sound like a good motion for the mover and the seconder? Okay, so we will get that up. So that's been moved by Counselor Pelosa and seconded by Counselor Lewis. And we can vote on that. And let the record show that I predicted we would be ready for the next item at 5 o'clock. It's 5:05.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So next is 4.2, which is a submission from Counselor Hopkins regarding short-term accommodations. And so Counselor, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go to staff first, or do you want to introduce your letter? Okay, Counselor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me, and committee, thank you for receiving my request. You have a bit of information where this is coming from. It is regarding short-term accommodations, and my request is very simple: for a report back to you from staff on any potential regulatory options that we can have for short-term accommodations. And if I may, I'd like to speak to 4 reasons, the importance why I'm bringing this forward. First of all, a little bit of background. This report did come to council a number of years ago, 2 years ago, in fact, and the report was wasn't really a concern at the time in the city, and we did receive that report. And since then, I've started to receive a number of concerns in my ward, and I know I've spoken to other councillors that are experiencing the same concerns regarding short-term accommodations in their wards as well. And I think it is an opportunity now that we can revisit and have a look at regulating short-term accommodations. And I want to be a little bit specific as well, because the short-term accommodations, the problems tend to be around houses themselves that are not owner occupied. They're rented out on like a regular basis, and we're starting to see more concerns in our neighborhoods around large parties. They're being used as hotels, things like that, where there's no one really there to make sure that the concerns in the neighborhood are being met, other than just calling the police. But it tends to disrupt the neighborhoods. The other part that I think is really important that we should really consider, we've gone through a conversation about housing, for instance, in the City of London, and we really do owe it to ourselves to understand how many of these units are we losing to these kind of hotels, or and how many of these lost units that could have been used for rentals in our city have a better understanding. I think it's important for us as a council to understand. And really my last point is really about the concern that I have, how our neighborhoods may be changing as a result of this, and we should look at some kind of regulation, whatever that may look like. It will really be up to staff to come back and show us what other cities are doing. There's a number of cities that have regulations, but our neighborhoods are starting to not only experience, the noise, the garbage, the traffic, the cars in and out. All those things are changing our neighborhoods. So with that, I will leave my request with the committee for further conversation, and thank you.
So I'm going to go to Ms. Misiko first, because it looks like you have something to say.
Hi there, through the chair. Yes, for the that don't know me, my name is Nicole Musico, and I work as a policy specialist and researcher alongside Mr. Katolik and Mr. Kostofis. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for coming. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this time I wasn't just chewing my pencil with thought. I want to thank Councillor Hopkins for bringing this forward, and I fully support what she's asking here. And I would like to see us have a report back that certainly I would consider differences between owner occupied and not owner occupied, because I think there are some. But I think that we as a city need to move forward with some regulations on these accommodations, these short-term accommodations, period, whether they're owner occupied or not. At the end of the day, the folks who are operating these rentals are running a business out of their home, whether they live in their home or not. We license every other business that operates in the city. In this case, our hoteliers pay the municipal accommodation tax, but we are not collecting that on visits to these short-term rentals. I don't think we're supporting a fair playing field there for the hotel industry when we're allowing these types of operations to go on unregulated. I too share the concern about the housing crisis. If we have a home that's sitting empty Monday through Thursday and is only being used on Friday and Saturday because somebody has rented it for the weekend, that's a place somebody could be living. And it's unfairly driving people out of the housing market to the profit of somebody who's not a resident of London. If it's not an owner-occupied thing, a number of these owners don't live in the community. They live elsewhere, and they're simply profiting from a property here in London. We'll hardly be the first city to do this. I think that it would be very easy to get some information out of other municipalities, how they've approached this. I know there's a few different options available. I know when this came before council last time that this was a fairly new phenomena, and you know, there was great interest in how the sharing economy was going to develop. But I think that it's clear now that it comes with its own set of problems as well as its own set of benefits. So I fully support this going forward. I don't want to jump the gun because I know that Councillor Hopkins has already talked to Councillor Pelosa. So if there's a motion ready, I'm going to let that come forward first. But thank you very much for bringing this forward. I was willing to bring it forward if you hadn't beat me to the punch, but you did, and it's well thought out, and happy to support it.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Councillor Lewis for willing to be the seconder on this, as I will be moving it. And thank you for Councillor Hopkins, as I've been getting emails as well in this, and hearing from residents as our community changes, and our residents are concerned about civic pride, taking care of your neighborhoods, and some of these places don't have the grass being tended to, the garbage being taken out, and it's just people popping up for the weekend, taking over the neighborhood, and then they're gone. We've spoken of the housing crisis, and exactly to Councillor Lewis's point, these are homes that could be used for Londoners who are desperately looking. And I heard from the other side too, of people looking out to do short-term rentals because they need to supplement their income, or some seniors might be lonely and it would be beneficial to have someone with them, or there's just extra rooms and they're starting to recognize that that is lost revenue, that you have these empty rooms, and that's the conversations we need to be having with our housing in the city. And I've heard about our neighborhoods changing, and I've heard from people who live in more expensive housing markets and they can't afford a house in the GTA. And I've heard from some who are buying here, getting to the housing market this way, they're just renting there. And this is how they're gaining equity by buying up places in other people's community with no intention of coming here themselves. So I will move this at this point.
Thank you. And I just want to say thanks as well to Councillor Hopkins. You know, I admit that I feel like I let the ball drop on this one. I was waiting for another report back, and I wasn't aware that there was a feeling like the motion had been addressed, the one from back in 2018, because I did support the staff recommendation back then to just sort of to let it sit for a while, because it wasn't a widespread problem yet in London. Yet I know I had at that time an Airbnb in Ward 5. That was a problem. And in that situation, it had been owner occupied at one time, and then the owners moved out and moved somewhere else and kept that going as an Airbnb, and that's when the problems began. And this was a regular family neighborhood right across the street from a school, and it was a large house with a pool in the backyard, and it has caused a lot of problems for the neighborhood. But because there were just a few here and there scattered throughout the city, we thought that we would let it go for a year or so and before we made any decisions. So just seeing that it had come off the deferred matters list without my even noticing, I'm really happy that you brought this forward, Councillor. I'm really happy to support this. I wonder if we talk about potential regulatory options. I wonder if we might add, if the mover would be open to adding very specifically and with respect to report back with respect to potential regulatory options that could be put in place, and also possible municipal accommodation tax being applied to these short-term rentals. Councillor Hopkins?
If I could just make a comment to that, I know the short-term rental accommodations, and maybe we need staff to confirm this, but I think it's already being looked at through financial services. I could be wrong, but we are still expected to get that report back.
Okay, and I'm seeing staff nodding, so that's great. I just thought, since it had come off the deferred matters list, that it all had not just the regulations, but also the possible application of the MAT tax. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I spoke with finance today and they confirmed that it is still on their work program and they're aware that something needs to be done about that.
Great, that's excellent news. So any other comments from committee? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair, and I wanted to add on, I'd spoken to finance as well, coming out of a Tourism London board meeting with the hoteliers concerned about fairness, and it had been indicated to me that they were certainly looking at it, and that Airbnb actually had been very positive in their discussions with our team about supporting our implementation of that. So I think that piece, I hope when this report comes back that we can actually maybe see both pieces together rather than dealing with it separately, just so that for consistency's sake, we're not dealing with one set of regulations and then another. But yeah, I'm under the understanding that discussions are moving forward on that as well.
Wonderful. We have a mover, we have a seconder. Any other comments? Then I guess we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And speaking of deferred matters, the next item is the deferred matters list. I'll look for somebody to move receipt of the deferred matters list. Councillor Salee, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any comments, Councillor Lewis, on the deferred matters list? Yes. Wow, surprise. Go ahead.
Just one, and you're right, Councillor Hillier, it is number 9. We had a requested, I'm just looking for an update, and I know Mr. Katolik's not here, so I just wonder if through the staff, maybe if the clerks could ask if Mr. Katolik could provide us an anticipated update date for the next cycle of the committee.
So the clerks will talk to Mr. Katolik and ask for that, and that's been moved and seconded, so we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So now I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Wow, don't everybody put your hands up at once. Councillor Salee and seconded by Councillor Lewis. We can do it manually, all in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody.